This is the second in a series on the making of God's Country. God's Country, an original musical prairie drama created in 1984 by volunteers in Crosby County, Texas. The Rio Blanco Heritage Foundation is the producing organization. The drama is presented each year in August in the Blanco Canyon Amphitheater, 10.5 miles north of Crosbyton. The characters you will meet were pioneers in Crosby County during the 1880s. The actors representing these historical characters are volunteers from Crosby County.
Good afternoon, folks. Welcome to God's Country. My name's J.W. Murray, John Murray. My wife Rebecca and I came out here in 1886 to publish the first newspaper, the Crosby County News. You know, a lot has happened out here since we came. My son Hal and I rode a velocipede just like this one out here in 1885 to see this country and to decide whether or not we wanted to come. I'm putting together a special edition of the Crosby County newspaper right now to honor the dedication of our new courthouse. And I'm headed out to the Rock House out in Blanco Canyon to visit with Hank and Elizabeth Smith. Hank and Elizabeth were two of the first settlers here in Crosby County, and I think you'll enjoy meeting them. As a matter of fact, if it hadn't been for Hank, I never would have come here. He encouraged me to come out here and see this country, and then he and Elizabeth made me so much at home that we decided to come back. We didn't settle in Blanco Canyon, but we moved out to Estacado, and now we're in the process of dedicating our new courthouse. I think you'll enjoy going with me out to Hank and Elizabeth's and learning about some of the early memories of this God's country.
My goodness, Lizzie. Here comes John Murray on that crazy contraption of his. You suppose he rode all the way from Estacado on that thing today?
Morning, Mr. Murray. Come in.
Elizabeth?
How are you?
Hi, John. Good to see you.
Good
Have
to
a seat.
see you. Thank you. Thank you.
Have a seat here. Hank and I just stopped a few minutes to rest and have some coffee. Let me pour some for you.
Well, thank you, Elizabeth. I appreciate some. Those
Well,
cookies look awfully good.
Cookie. Have a cookie.
Well, Hank, I guess you and Elizabeth know that I'm here more on business than just a social call today. I'm putting out a special edition of the Crosby County News. We're going to honor the dedication of the new courthouse. And since you and Elizabeth are the two first settlers here in Crosby County, I figured the two of you could help me get a lot of good stories of the early history of this area. Why don't you tell me some of your memories of Crosby County in the early days?
Well, John, before I start back on the early days, I was over at Estacado the other day with some business at the courthouse. After I got that done, I decided to ride around over the town and see what's going on, what news there. I rode by yours and Rebecca's house, looked at your yard, saw some strange plants out there, John.
Now, you're not talking about my cotton plants,
Right.
are you, Hank?
Now, I've been around long enough to know what cotton looks like, but most of these ranchers haven't. And if we're not going to have a lynching in Crosby County, you better be careful.
Well, you know, there may be a real history for cotton here in this county before long.
Oh, we're ranching country. I came out here with Charlie Hoss. We brought some supplies to the commissary, and we started making the house ready for Elizabeth and the children. They came out here from Fort Griffin in the fall of 1872, just before Thanksgiving.
Well, that was quite a trip for you, Elizabeth. Was that your most exciting adventure of your lifetime?
Oh, no. Well, you see, I was born in Scotland, and at a very young age, I came to America, and I lived with my brothers in Missouri. And after Mother passed away, then Father came to live with us for a while. Then after that, I went to Fort Griffin to live with my brother James. Oh, what a special memory I have for that. You see, every year they had a New Year's ball, and I got there just in time for that. And in fact, that's when Hank and I met.
Well, when was that anyway, Elizabeth?
That was New Year's Eve in 1873. I'll never forget that.
Well, when were you and Hank married?
Well, we married March of 74.
That's a pretty short courtship.
Well, some folks might have thought so, but you know, most of my folks were at Fort Griffin, and our marriage was certainly a gala ball. We had the soldiers from the fort. We had cowboys. We had ranchers. Of course, they were all friends of ours.
How old were you then, Hank?
Let's see, I guess I was 38 at that time.
38. Well, you'd been around this country a good while then, before you and Elizabeth married.
John, I left Germany and crossed the Atlantic when I was 14 years old. And as a lad, I served as a sailor on Lake Erie till the boat was wrecked. Then I bid my sister goodbye and I headed out west. I worked as a driver on the Santa Fe and also the Oregon Trail out of Fort Laramie, Wyoming. Then I went to California, I guess 1858. And on the way there, I spent the winter in that Mormon town of Salt Lake.
1858 was just right after the California gold rush in 1849. Did you see much of the gold fever?
Oh, yeah, I got it too. I did my first gold prospecting above the Gila River in Arizona.
Well, you got the gold fever then.
Oh, everybody caught the gold fever at that time. The temperature out there in the Yuma Desert would often reach 120 degrees. The best gold samples we found was miles from the river. Getting the ore to the water over that rough terrain was certainly a hard task. We'd load our bureaus with about 300 pounds of ore, and then we'd have to help each animal down those steep slopes with ropes. I didn't do any more gold prospecting until I reached the Piñas Altas area in New Mexico.
Well, living out in the desert that way, Hank, you were not close to supplies and provisions of any kind. How did you manage to live off the land?
Well, finding food was always a problem. Often as not, what little we had would be stolen by the foraging Indians.
Did you see much of the stage out in that area at that time?
Well, as a matter of fact, I had a job with the Butterfield Overland Stage Company. I cut forage for their stock, which is I usually used Indian corn. Did you know that company was really responsible for opening up the West?
Well, yes, I guess I did.
It didn't last long, though, just about 4 years. I did just about everything I could to get along with the Mexican men who cut hay for me. Indians, too, for that matter.
Well, now, there's a subject that everybody would be interested in, the Indians. Tell me something about the Indians out here at that time.
Well, most of the Indians I knew at that time was really quite peaceful. Even Mangus, Colorado, the Apache chief, helped me herd cattle a few times. I paid Mangus and his men $1 apiece, and I gave Mangus Squaw a blanket. But as time went on, it seemed like the hostilities increased.
Well, now, those were all Apaches, weren't they?
Well, yes, they were. You knew that Cochise was Mangus' son-in-law?
Oh, no, I guess I didn't know that.
Well, he was. Yeah, those was Apaches. But out here, though, we had Comanches, and we really didn't have much trouble with them. Although Lizzie might argue that point a little bit.
Well, I can never forget the time that I had pies on the ledge of the window, and some of those stragglers came by and took my pies. Now, I was hostile.
The Comanches actually drove the Apaches in our area down to Old Mexico. And then after the Civil War, Colonel McKenzie, I believe that was 71 through 74, moved the Comanches to the Indian Reservation in Oklahoma. Every once in a while, 2 or 3 braves would kind of jump over the trace chains and would go out of the reservation for a while, but that's always caught pretty quick and carried back, so we really didn't have Indian trouble out here.
Well, you mentioned the Civil War, and that's another important aspect of this history. Were you here in this country during the Civil War?
No, John, I served with the Arizona Scouts, which joined the Confederates as an outfit during the war between the states. And then Roe Watkins and I contracted with Fort Bliss at El Paso and Fort Quitman to provide them with wood. I got in some trouble out there, though. which I'm not about to elaborate on.
Well, Hank, you lived out here in this part of the country in one of the most exciting times in American history. Now, if you won't tell us that story, at least tell us something about Fort Griffin.
Oh, I made my first journey to Fort Griffin in early 1872. I came up from San Antonio. When I got there, well, I got a job as clerk with the Conrad and Rath Mercantile store as a clerk. Almost immediately, I secured a contract to provide the fort with hay. So I took on a separate job of cutting and hauling hay. And then I had a young Scotsman, James Boyle, that came and helped me out in that job.
Now that James, that's the one I was telling you about. That's my brother, James Boyle. And then after we were married, we were managed the Occidental Hotel there. And I'll tell you, we had some of the most interesting people come through. I remember in particular John Lawrence from Kansas. And then there was John Selman. And John Selman killed John Wesley Hardin. And then I'll never forget that woman gambler, Lottie Dinoch. Hank, behave yourself.
She's bound to be one of your good friends, Elizabeth.
She tried to be our friend, all right.
Well, Elizabeth, you and Hank were pretty well domesticated, sounds to me like, there at Fort Griffin. I don't understand why the two of you ended up way out here in this remote part of West Texas.
Well, John Lloyd Jameson, Lord Jameson.
Lord?
He was an Irish lord, very wealthy. He came out to this country, and Charles Pennock Tasker convinced him that they ought to have a large ranch, that's the thing to do. So both of those contracted with me to come out west and find land. And one thing just led to another.
Tasker came down to Texas to find a place of his own. In his search, he found Blanco Canyon. He decided to make it his home. There was water and grass and acres of space, but the best part was that it was free. Said, Hank, come with me to this wild frontier land and help build a home here for me. So Hank built it here in this canyon, but Tasker's money began to run low. He couldn't pay Hank for his work on the ranch, so he skipped out to old Mexico. That's how Hank came to live in this country. The walls of that rock house still stand, a tribute to Hank and all the others that settle this wild frontier land.
John, it's too late for you to try to go back to Estacado tonight. Don't you think you ought to just spend the night here?
Well, it is getting late, Elizabeth. Yes, I think I could, but I'm going to have to get up mighty early tomorrow morning to get back to Estacado because I've got to meet Paris Cox and George Hunt to interview them for the newspaper. You know, they're part of the Quakers up there at Estacado, and I've got to visit with them.
Well, that's all right. You know, we're always up and about early.
Okay.
How are the crops going? Pretty good. Okay, now you can start. Go ahead. Here comes John Murray. I wonder if you rode that thing all the way out to Mount Blanco and back.
Sure I did.
Oh,
hello,
George.
Mr. Murray. Paris?
Hi, Joe.
How y'all doing?
Fine.
We heard about the special edition that you're putting together
right.
for the newspaper, and Paris and I have just been reminiscing about some of the early adventures that we had here at Estacado. Have a
You're
seat.
right. I'm putting out a special edition to honor the dedication of our new courthouse here in Estacado. And I'm trying to get stories from all over the county about the early history, and that's the reason I wanted to visit with y'all. I appreciate you sharing some time with me this afternoon, and all I want you to do is tell me everything you know about Estacado.
Everything.
Well, when I first heard about Estacado, I wasn't sure that I wanted to bring my family here at all. I'd heard everyone was living in tents and the wind blew all the time, and I wasn't sure it would be a good place to bring my family, or that I even wanted to come at all.
Now, George, that was back in 1879. I'd gone out to Indiana and brought back 3 Quaker families with me. At that time, Mary and I were living in a half dugout. These people were living in tents. We had a really wicked winter, and come spring, the wind came and blew away their tents and most of their possessions. Well, they got sick and tired of it and packed up everything and headed on back to Indiana.
Well, why did you come to such a remote place anyway?
Well, I started out in North Carolina. I was conscripted by the Confederate States, but being a Quaker, that was against my religious convictions. So I was able to buy my way out. I headed on up to Indiana. It was there I met Mary and went into business with her father. We had a sawmill, and when the good lumber ran out, we had to close up. So I got together with some buffalo hunters and headed on west. We came to the State Plains of Texas. One day I woke up and outside of Uncle Hank's place, and I looked out over the land and I said, by God's will, this is going to be my home.
Praise the Lord.
So I went off to Austin and found out that through a railroad act, I could buy the land for 25 cents an acre. So I got together with some friends back east, and we bought up 50,000 acres at 25 cents.
Boy, that's a lot of land. Well, why did you come out here, George?
Well, the land price, for one thing, John, was very attractive.
Sure was.
And Brother Parrish and my brother was already here, and they were very persuasive and felt like that we would prosper well by coming here and building a hotel. So I decided to bring my family and grow with the country.
Well, did you build this first hotel here in Crosby County?
I sure did. The hotel that I built was a 14 by 28 two-story building that was lined with adobe brick. And on to the west side of that was a one-story addition that had caked earth floor that was used for the kitchen and the dining room. The roof was a canvas roof, and the sides so open that the howling wind and blizzard just came right on through. But these slight defects, however, were soon remedied, and we were able to have a fine hotel for all our guests to stay in, and an impressive table was set for all of them.
Well, this was really a remote area. Did you have any communication at all from the outside?
Well, Aunt Hank was our first postmistress. She still gets the mail out there. But in 1881, we wanted to register Marietta. I'd named it after my wife, Mary. So we sent off to Austin, but word came back there was already a Marietta post office, so we changed the name to Estacada. The stage brought in the mail about 3 times a week out of Colorado City. Along with that, they brought passengers at $15 a trip.
By the way, Brother Parrish, tell John about some of the early experiences that you had at Estacada, about the time my brother came here.
Well, you know, George, Will was the second one to move out here. It's sort of interesting how he came, however. My wife was in the family way, and he came out to deliver our first child, a girl by the name of Bertha. He had to stay here for a period of time, but went back home. But he liked the land so well that he brought his family out a year later. We had a rough time that first year. Just he and I were the only ones out here. Well, I remember one time our supplies got so low that all we had was a chicken. That's what Will had. And Mary just had a bag of flour. We were waiting for things to come in from Colorado City, 130 miles on south. Well, we decided we were going to have a feast of chicken and dumplings. So we got together and our families together, and we fixed up the meal and had a good old time. And lo and behold, the next day, our food came in from Colorado City.
Praise the Lord.
Amen.
Well, what do you remember about the way Estacada was originally?
Well, John, as you may or may not know, the town of Estacada was originally built around the well, which was the first well that was dug on the plains. George Singer had the first store in town of general merchandise, and of course there was my hotel, as I've already told you. Across the street from the hotel was a general merchandise store of Charlie Holmes, who was also one of the first postmasters. And as Brother Parrish has already told you, the mail was brought in about 3 times a week from Colorado City. 200 yards west of my hotel, a new large store was being constructed by Stringfellow and Hume to have a large inventory of general merchandise. Across the street from Stringfellow and Hume was a 2-room office building that was occupied by our first and new judge of the county, Judge George Swink. Across the street from Judge Swink was a dugout occupied by the only legal lad on the plains, Attorney E.B. Covington. Those 5 buildings, along with the school, of course, and the church, would have constituted the town of Estacada. Now, surrounding the town, of course, were all the Quaker settlers who were, without a question, the first settlers to attempt farming on the plains of Texas. And their constant companion in those days, even as today, was the ever-present wind.
It's been here since creation, so I guess it's here to stay. On the Llano Estacado until the judgment's day. It knows not one direction, it can come from anywhere. To loose its power and fury on whatever standing there. Standing there. From the north it comes in wintertime to chill the Texas plain. From the east it comes so cool and moist, a promise it will rain. From the south it's sometimes hot and dry, more often tearing drought. From the west in spring a time to fear, for man there is no doubt. There is no doubt. Laundry hanging on the line, it doesn't have a prayer. Bed sheets, nightgowns, breeches too, go flying through the air. More than a breeze it seems, sometimes it never slows. Ladies, tie thy bonnets on real tight, the wind it blows and blows, blows and blows. Merchant in Crosbyton. He served on the city council and mayor for the city of Crosbyton for 15 years. He's currently a member of the board of directors of Crosby County Pioneer Memorial Museum, and he served on the board of directors of the Rio Blanco Heritage Foundation during its formative years. To his left is Margie Rhodes. She is a graduate of Texas Tech University. Her degree is in business education. She currently serves on the Crosbyton City Council. She has served as president of the Crosbyton Chamber of Commerce during the development time of this prairie drama and amphitheater project. She has served as vice president, then became the second president of the Rio Blanco Heritage Foundation. Many credits to her name. And she currently serves on the board of directors of the Rio Blanco Heritage Foundation. First of all, we'll start with George Witt. George, tell us how God's Country got its start.
Carla, it actually began in 1975 when a small committee spearheaded by Sandra Witt and Vernann Wheeler began investigating the possibility of developing an outdoor drama for Blanco Canyon. The project did not materialize at that time because the necessary people and talents were not available.
All right, now that was in 1975. It was actually sometime later before the project was founded.
That's correct. It was in 1974 when the board of directors of the Crosby County Pioneer Memorial Museum adopted the project and asked Pat Brown, who was at that time a Texas Tech student working at the museum, to do a feasibility study. The study included research on the Fandangle at Albany and Texas at Paladura. She also obtained a copy of Don Williams' doctoral thesis, which described the Texas production. Then in 1985, the board of directors of the museum put their full support behind the development of 3 samplers that were presented at various civic functions. The sesquicentennial and Crosby County's 100th birthday were both scheduled for 1986. All of this seemed to appeal to the public's imagination. We didn't realize the quality of talent or the number of talented people that were living in our communities until we became really serious about the prairie drama and the amphitheater.
Okay, so the timing was there. Now you needed a place. Did you have a place in mind?
Well, not at that time. The presentation of the 3 samplers really created a lot of excitement in the community, and the pressure was on to select a site for the amphitheater. Mabry Greenhall, who is now administrator of Crosbyton Clinic Hospital, headed the site search committee and secured a 50-year lease on an 11-acre tract from Viola Brown of Floydada. Mrs. Brown is a descendant of Hank and Elizabeth Smith and owns some of the original Smith land in Blanco Canyon. The land she offered met all the criteria necessary to successfully build an outdoor theater. It is accessible from a highway, there's space for parking, it has a natural seating capability, and a beautiful view of the White River Valley.
Yes, it is a beautiful view. I remember a big, tall windmill. Is that still there?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Margie, I understand you were president of the founding organization during this time. What were some of the key elements that made it seem so timely?
The area economy was very depressed at that time, and we were in need of a morale booster that would also unify the 3 towns in Crosby County. Also, there seemed to be an abundance of untapped ability that lacked a key person or purpose to set it in motion.
All right, you needed money. How was it funded?
When the Rio Blanco Heritage Foundation was formed in 1985, membership dues of $10 per family were set. Then in September of that same year, the first of 4 hee-haw type variety shows was staged in Crosbyton, utilizing county-wide talent. These netted several $1,000s. And by this time, donations of anywhere from $25 to $100 began to trickle in. Also, the proceeds of a county beauty pageant held in July of 1986 were donated to our building fund. Then, in an act of blind faith, we began selling tickets before we had started rehearsals or even completed casting. And as money began arriving in the mail along with ticket orders, we added it to our small bankroll. And finally, as we actually began to purchase supplies and materials, we found money going out faster than it came in. So we secured a loan at the bank, and I'm happy to say we paid off this loan after the 2nd season of God's Country.
A good feeling. You worked for it. And I also happen to know that you guys rolled up your sleeves. You took the women, the children, the men, the young, the old, and you all got out there and built an amphitheater. Tell me about that.
Right. Although we have actually failed to keep an accurate head count, we have conservatively estimated that approximately 100 county volunteers, ranging from teenagers to senior citizens, worked under the guidance of a local building contractor, Johnny Forbes. During the initial construction period, over 30,000 man-hours, and I have to say woman-hours, were logged, and the following year, 12,000 hours were spent making repairs and upgrading the facility. This season has been considerably easier, as only routine improvements and repairs are needed to keep the amphitheater in good repair.
Okay, the time, the place, now the talent. Where did you find the talent for such an endeavor?
By asking, mostly our families and friends or anyone who's even remotely involved in the project. Then we published an ad in our local newspaper that read, "Needed desperately 50 men with strong backs to work at the amphitheater site on Saturday, April the 12th." And this was signed by the gang bosses, Mabry Greenhaw and Charlie Wheeler. Lastly, we were only limited at times by our own reluctance to ask, because we never asked that we didn't receive what was needed to keep the project going.
It was hard work, wasn't it?
Yes, it was, but well worth it.
Yeah, and you had fun, too.
We had a lot of fun.
Bottom line, you had fun. Okay. Margie, George, thank you both for being here. Now we'd like to introduce Pat Brown. She is the author of God's Country. She is also the director of the Education Project of the Crosby County Pioneer Memorial Museum in Crosbyton. Pat, you wrote the script. I understand that from the beginning you adopted the idea that the truth was more interesting than fiction.
Yes, I did, Carla. The people of the Fandangle in Albany stress to tell history like it is, to tell the truth. And we know that telling about real people really means more to us, and it's such a thrill to see people come alive.
What were some of the things you decided to use?
We have been blessed with so many books, diaries, narratives, and records that there is an abundance of material. I wanted to tell the Quakers, a small group that came and braved the March winds living in tents, of the Hank Smith family, their impact on the area, and the most famous story of all about Ann Hank, who a postal inspector thought could tell her how to handle the mail.
What were some of the sources you used to obtain your information?
The Quaker scene is from Hunt's early days in the plains of Texas, and information on the Paris Cox family. Getting Ready, the cowboy scene, is from Rollie Burns by Dr. Holden. I visualized that episode for just years and years, and it was probably the easiest one to write. The Ann Hank scene is from family records as well as Sunrising on the West. The Outlaws' getaway and the trial are from the Spurs. And the Indian scene is from all the books that's ever been written about Quanah Parker.
You titled the play God's Country. Why that name?
Actually, Carla, that too is a blend of several sources. In Road to Destiny, they mentioned the land of Canaan. Well, I liked the concept, but it was a bit lofty and not too catchy. But it did remind me of a conversation that I had when I was taking a history class with Dr. Charles Wood. He was from Nebraska and had the audacity to say that was God's country. Well, several students objected to that statement because they thought they lived in God's country. So actually, if you love where you live, you really are in God's country.
Pat, thank you for sharing the story of your contributions to God's Country. Now we'd like you to meet Dr. Don Williams, a native of Spur, now Vice President for Academic Affairs and Dean of Lubbock Christian University. He is no stranger to outdoor theater, as we'll see. Don, you're the director of God's Country. How did anyone as busy as you are get involved with these folks in Crosby County?
Well, Carl, it was actually two things, I think. First, I grew up in Spur, Texas, as you mentioned, which is close, so I consider that God's country, and they took the name, moved it to Crosbyton. But I wanted to do something for the area, and so when I heard they were doing a show, I decided it would be worthwhile to take a look at it. And then, of course, I had worked with a Texas production for a number of years, and it was a lot of fun. And so when the opportunity came, I took advantage of it.
Tell me about some of the elements that make outdoor theater so unique.
Basically, I think first you have to consider the weather. We are constantly bombarded by a southwesterly wind that blows everyone away, their voice away. It can blow them away at times, but the idea of not miking them is done in some shows, but we use some cordless mics to assist because of the wind. And that becomes a major factor. We emphasize it in a couple of the songs as we go through the show. And then I think second is the fact to use livestock. And we utilize a Shetland pony who does a good job for us early on. And then we have a rancher from the area who plays his harmonica and brings everyone back in after intermission.
I guess when you use animals as actors, anything can happen.
That's right. The little Shetland has its own mind. Some nights she works easily, other nights she doesn't. And also being outdoors, we have the opportunity to have animals who come and visit us that we don't intend to use. Last year we had a skunk who came through, and one of our sharp actors worked the aroma into an ad-lib line, which he wanted to continue after that, but we couldn't get the skunk back.
Didn't run the audience off, though.
No, the audience was concerned. They were looking around to see if he was coming down the aisle or where, because the aroma was quite strong.
Talking about the weather, though, affecting outdoor drama, I understand last year the rain actually came and went in perfect timing.
Just excellent. We couldn't have asked for it better. In fact, it rained right up to the start a couple of times, or came by and showered and then left.
And you're a firm believer in the show must go on.
Right.
Okay, it takes a lot. It just about takes a tornado to call off God's country.
Yes, I think the actors had a lot of fun with the wet stage a couple of times, but we kept it together.
Okay, let's touch on the role of music in this play.
This play has some very fine music. In fact, last year we added a song to the Indian sequence called the Indian Lullaby, which is just a beautiful melody. And we have several other folk songs. And of course we have the ensemble that plays, and I think that's one of the strong points of the show, is the fact that we have a live orchestra there, and we're emphasizing a lot of tunes that are very simple tunes, and some folks know them, others are intrigued by their melody. I think one of the more interesting songs that came out of the script is the Quaker Courtship song, which Kevin Rainwater and Camille Driscoll are going to sing for us at this time.
Once there was a Quaker lover, oh dear me, courted a Presbyterian's daughter, oh dear me. Here's a ring worth many a shilling, oh dear me. Take it and wear it if thou art willing, oh dear me.
What do I care for you and your money? T.I. Dinktum, T.I. Day. Want a man to call me honey? T.I. Dinktum, T.I. Day.
Madam, I have home and land, oh dear me. Both shall be at thy command, oh dear me.
What do I care for your home and land? T.I. Dinktum, T.I. Day. All I want's a handsome man. T.I. Dinktum, T.I. Day.
Madam, I have come a-courtin', oh dear me. Not for pleasure nor for sportin', oh dear me.
What do I care for your desire? T.I. Dinktum, T.I. Day. If you come, you'll court the fire. T.I. Dinktum, T.I. Day.
Madam, I'll go tell my mother.
Your mother?
Oh dear me. She'll go out and find me another, oh dear me.
What do I care for you and your mother? T.I. Dinktum, T.I. Day. She's an old Quaker and you're another. T.I. Dinktum, T.I. Day.
Must I change my religion? Oh dear me. Must I become a Presbyterian? Oh dear me.
cheer up, loving brother, T.I. Dingtum, T.I. Day. If you can't catch one fish, catch another, T.I. Dingtum, T.I. Day.
And that was the Quaker Courtship Song, a beautiful piece. And now we'd like for you to meet the musicians behind the songs in God's Country. Here with me is Rick Suddeth and Zama Norris. Now, Rick and his wife Sarah live in McAdoo. Rick declares that he is the best two-fingered fiddle player between White River and the Dickens County line.
Carla, that's a distance of about 5 miles.
Okay. In addition to his farming duties, he also teaches the fiddle in his spare time. Just a musical talent. And Zama Norris, she teaches music in the public school system in Rawls. She and her husband Doyle live in Rawls. And she constantly uses her natural music talents to play and sing for church and other civic affairs. We'll start with Rick. When and how did each of you hear about God's Country?
It was several months before the project actually got started. A lady approached me one day, and she kind of phrased it like this, said, "Rick, would you like to help put on an outdoor program?" And what came to my mind was a small civic club type program, and then, so I said yes.
Well, I guess you were an obvious choice. You are talented with the fiddle.
I do a whole lot of sawing around that part of the country, and more notorious probably than famous for playing the fiddle.
I've just got to ask this. What's the difference? When does a violin become a fiddle?
When you take the violin from the case and put it in a toe sack, it becomes a fiddle.
Okay, very good. Zama, how about you? How were you approached about God's Country?
Well, I had not even heard of the project, and one day in the elementary school in Rawls, Ann McDonald said something to me about it, and she's one of the persons who's most instrumental in getting this thing together. And I said, sure, I'd sing in the choir or do something. I really had no idea what they had in mind, and had no conception that it would come out the way that it has, or that I would be doing the things that I'm doing in it.
Okay, I guess that brought out the actress in you. Surely it appealed to you.
Oh, yes.
A lot of fun. What's the feeling being on the stage out there singing before an audience?
Oh, well, it's nice.
It is a lot of fun. You're both evidently very talented. Were you working together prior to this project?
No. In fact, most of us had not even met one another. Those of us that are playing the instruments and doing the singing and the actors, I knew very few people in the cast.
I think the first meeting that the Heritage Association had, that they gave me a list of people that had said they were interested in music, and Zama's name was on there, and Jane Morris's name was on there, and so they asked me if I would contact these people and tell them about the project. So that's how we had our first get-together.
Okay, the music. A lot of it is original. What was your inspiration?
The theme song, God's Country, Pat Brown, who authored the script, mentioned to me one day that it would be nice if we had an original song for a theme for the production. And I don't know why, but I began to work on a melody, and fairly soon I developed a chorus to the God's Country theme. And later, Jane Morris developed a melody to the verse of the song, and we put the parts together, and it worked.
What does God's Country say? What is it about?
God's Country is the aspirations of the people that were moving to a strange new land far from anyone, and the hopes that they had.
Okay, something obviously very near and dear to you.
Right, right.
Zama, the song "Welcome Everybody." Now that's a familiar old tune, isn't it?
Yes.
We just don't know it.
I thought everybody knew the song "Wait for the Wagon," and I felt like after the first year and the musicians talked, we felt we needed to start with something very dramatic and have everybody on the stage dancing and singing. And so all we have to do is just give Rick an idea, and he came up with a beautiful poem and adapted it to the song "Wait for the Wagon," and so this last year when we did it, we added some choreography, and everybody was on the stage dancing and singing, and we got the audience attention immediately.
All right, welcome everybody, the show opener. What about that rascal Tasker? Who's Tasker?
Tasker came down to Texas. In fact, that's the first line of the song. Came to Texas looking for a place to settle, some land to settle on, and he settled there in Blanco Canyon, and he started the now famous Rock House. But as the song tells, he ran out of money and more or less left in the middle of the night. And the idea for the song actually came from Pat Brown's script. The script is based on history, and this song is a more or less historical song about Tasker.
Okay, one of the most beautiful songs, I think, that I've heard is called simply The Wind. And Zema, this is sung from a woman's point of view. Tell me about the wind.
Well, as we talked earlier, if anyone has lived on the plains long enough to be able to hang clothes out on a line and not have a clothes dryer, you have an idea of what it's like to stand in the wind. And the song describes it very aptly.
And it also describes the frustrations that many of the first women settlers encountered here.
That's right, and it's put to a beautiful melody.
It really is. Tell me about the Indian lullaby.
Well, that's one of the most beautiful songs in the play, too, and this was one of the newest ones that Rick wrote last summer and we added, and I get to sing that one.
Okay.
It's very beautiful.
The Indian lullaby came about, Pat had developed the Indian scene, as we would call it, and felt that we needed to put across to the audience the feelings that the Indians were having at that time, because they were fixing to be moved to a faraway place. And that is the context of this song. It's an Indian woman singing to her baby.
All right, so if you've seen the drama before, there is going to be something new this year. You're constantly changing the music and so forth.
Right.
Okay, something fresh. Your musical talents do complement each other. Exactly how do you get the music to its present form?
I might mention on these original songs that I wrote, I'm an ear musician. I don't read music. And our problem was, after I had written these songs, as to how to get them on paper. So I talked to Zema about this thing, and she said, well, if you can make me some kind of a tape and send me this tape of this song, I'll try to put it in musical form. And so it finally got to where it worked pretty well after we did the first couple of songs. She read my mind really well on a lot of the things, because, like I say, I wasn't able to put it down on paper, but she could, and she put down my expressed desires amazing.
Well, you know, I think that's interesting, because probably a lot of the music that was written by the early settlers probably never found its way onto a sheet of music.
That's probably true.
Okay, very good. Where did you find the soloists who were capable of singing these varied lyrics?
Well, they were all members of the cast, and it was easy to find the singers. The songs just fit their voices. For example, Camille on the Wind song, they just seemed to go together, and Jane and God's Country. We just wrote it in the key that fit their voice, and they were there for us to use.
Zema, tell me what musical instruments were used.
Well, of course, we started with the fiddle that Rick had, and the bass guitar and some guitars and the piano.
Okay. Rick, I understand you encountered a few problems in presenting live music nightly. How did you overcome them?
Right. Somewhere down the line, I don't know where it happened, but we made the decision that live music was the thing to do with this production. And it created things we never dreamed of, such things as you would tune your instruments in the heat of the afternoon, and by the time the production started, weather had cooled down, tuning on the instruments had all changed. So we had to constantly be retuning instruments before the show went on. We tried to, in the music, copy the types of instruments that were used in the early days, back in the 1880s. So the piano, the guitar, the fiddle were all common to music of that time. So that's the reason that we use these instruments. The piano posed a rather severe problem the first year. We obtained the loan of an upright piano from the museum there in Crosbyton. Of course, it takes a lot of rehearsal for these type things. So every night we loaded the piano, every night we unloaded the piano, every night we loaded it back up again, and every night we unloaded it again for approximately 3 weeks. And but it really worked because when we got to the site, people were always willing to help pick up a piano. That's what it amounted to.
I guess the weather was a consideration too, leaving a piano or a large instrument like that. You always have to worry about protecting it. So I guess you've learned to tune your instruments just before the show.
We've worked on that, yes ma'am, sure have.
Okay. Thank you, Rick Suddeth and Zayma Norris. In closing, I'd like to say that God's Country is worth seeing. It's a great family production. And remember, it's at the Outdoor Amphitheater, 10.5 miles north of Crosbyton on Highway 651. Production times are in August. The dates, 4th, 5th, and 6th, and the 11th, 12th, and 13th, nightly at 8:30 p.m., or as they like to say in Crosbyton, dark 30. For ticket information, you can contact the Rio Blanco Heritage Foundation. The information is on your screen. And now we'd like to leave you with the God's Country theme as sang by Jane Morris, accompanied by the God's Country Players.
This land in northwest Texas, stretched as far